Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with the Curator. I'm Tracee Glab, for those of you who don't know me. Thank you so much to our sponsor, Big B Coffee, for sponsoring this series on topics related to the permanent collection and exhibitions at the Flint Institute of Arts. We will be taking a break for the summer, and we will resume Monday, September 12th with a talk from Associate Curator Sarah Cohn on contemporary ceramics. So we look forward to that talk. Today I'm going to take you very far into the past, though, with a work of ceramic in our collection. It's almost 300 years old. It's getting to that almost 300-year-old anniversary. And I'm really excited to talk to you about how the ways one object can have myriad connections with people, places, and history, and how just this one object that is in the Flint Institute of Arts can really show how stellar and unique and wonderful our collection is and what it can bring to everyone. The first connection this object has is with a person, the Emperor Yongzheng of China's Qing Dynasty. The emperor was the third emperor of the Qing Dynasty. During his rule, the administration, and this is a painting of him up on the screen, during his administration, power was consolidated and became concentrated in the emperor's hands. He was the fourth son of the emperor, so not immediately in line for the throne, as the first son would have been. But when the designated heir became mentally deranged, Yongzheng saw his opportunity to seize the throne and begin to plot against his other brothers. Several historians of the period allege that he even murdered his father. But whatever the truth is, when he succeeded to the throne on December 27th, 1722, so that's almost 300 years ago, he spent the first years of his reign imprisoning or executing his brothers and their supporters. So he wanted to make sure he wasn't going to get ousted. So on the left, you see a map of the Qing Dynasty, and to give you a little context in terms of Chinese history, which I'm not going to go into real depth here, but Qing, or also means pure, dynasty was the last of the imperial dynasties, and they reigned from 1644 to 1911/12. During this dynasty, the territory of the empire grew 3 times to its size compared to the previous Ming dynasty. The Qing dynasty, this is an important thing to think about as we're going to be talking about this object, was established by the Manchus. They were a semi-nomadic people from northeast of the Great Wall. So on the screen here, you see the zigzag there? That's the Great Wall. That's the Great Wall. So they were north of the Great Wall, northeast of the Great Wall. When they took over, they adopted the Ming form of government and employed Ming officials, transfer of power. In the artwork they made, they often referred back to the Ming styles and subject matter as another means of demonstrating their legitimacy. So how did the Qing dynasty use art? That's why we're all here today, to establish legitimacy and to promote the ideals of the rulers. The answer is that they had to strictly regulate what artists produced, creative and control. But to also have the high aim of the very, very high quality of the artwork produced and expression of very specific messages. So this wasn't a time of freedom for artists. However, it was a time of very high quality for artists making works because of the standards and the support and financial support of the government. During Yongzheng's 13-year reign, the emperor personally supervised production of a profusion of new shapes and colors at the ceramic kilns at Zhengzhen. Sorry. Thank you. That was a tongue twister. An example of his strict control and oversight of the ceramic kilns is right here in the FIA's collection. On the right, the porcelain flask with bird handles. The Yongzheng Emperor personally approved every aspect of ceramics produced in the imperial workshop, from decoration through to dimensions to color. Official records include his comments such as, quote, refine an elegant presence, or, quote, to make thinner. According to the 8-character seal, that's what this is here. So this is on the bottom of this vase, if you turn it over, this 8-character seal. This work was made as a sample in the 12th year of the reign of Yongzheng. So this is just another example of how tightly he controlled production, is that they would have to make a sample for him to approve before it ever went into production. Marks on porcelain, and I've got some illustrious visitors here today. Dr. Robert and Deanna Harrisberger can tell you a lot. They know about this. And also Catherine Charbot, our resident ceramics expert. So both of these marks were found on the bottom of porcelain works. The one on the left is the 8-character mark that we found on our vase, but the one on the right is what's called the imperial reign mark. And you can see it's a slightly different script as well, more cubit, more cube-like and angular versus the more freehand style on the left. And the reason why there's a distinction there is because the one on the right would be what would be on the objects that's produced and approved, and the one on the left would be something that's not approved yet. During his reign, a huge amount of resources were devoted to porcelain in the imperial kiln. He recruited, or maybe he coerced, I don't know, the best craftsmen in the country to create a wide variety of innovative wares that proved to form a triumphant chapter in the history of Chinese ceramics. So this is Qing Dynasty wares is really known for this really high quality and attention to craftsmanship. And here's another example from our collection that is also given by the same donor. I'm not telling you who the donor is just yet because that's part of the build-up in this talk, but it's been given to us by the same donor. And you can see that the ceramics produced under his reign are very beautiful, delicate, refined. They have an almost lightness and just gentle elegance of forms that really kind of communicate something very refined, and probably what the emperor wanted to project of himself, with this idea of, he's not a violent murderer. He's sophisticated and cultured and appreciates the arts. Here's another, and as you can see, that this has the imperial mark on the bottom, which is the one we just saw, not the sample. So we've established that he had tight control over the works created in the imperial kilns, but in what other ways could he use these art forms to legitimize his rule and convey his power? One strategy was to base these ceramic forms on ancient ceramics or bronzes preserved in the imperial collection, such as this Han Dynasty wine flask, Bianhu. It's now in the Art Institute of Chicago, but it was originally in China and made under the Han Dynasty. So you can see that's about 1,500 years prior to the Yongzheng Emperor. And you can see probably a resemblance already with our flask. So, but the one on the right is bronze, and the one on the left is porcelain. The heart-shaped body is very similar. The semi-wide neck here, the flared bottom, and then the handles that are not quite one-to-one, but there's definitely a relationship here of having the handles up on the side. This would have been actually used to store and drink wine, whereas this is just emulating that ancient form. And what other ways could he connect it to the past? And one of the ways is the work itself. We've talked about ancient shapes and emulating that size and shape. But what about these birds? And I can tell you that, just a little backstory, they've been called several different things. Originally in the file it was called Parrot, and then we started to wonder if it was a parrot because of the little knob on his head there. So this is also a work in the same time period, a ceramic Chinese parrot. So you kind of look at see the similarities. And I'm going to tell you what each symbolize. Maybe we'll have a vote at the end to decide what it is. Parrots in Chinese art symbolize freedom and long life. But then as I was researching this and we were looking at other examples, the idea of a peacock came to mind. And that does have something on its head, but the tail is awfully a lot longer than what you see on the ceramic vessel. In the Ming Dynasty, and remember they were the successors to the Ming Dynasty, so they wanted to connect works of their contemporary art to Ming Dynasty. In the Ming Dynasty, the peacock was the symbol of their dynasty. So interesting connection that could possibly be a peacock, though it doesn't quite look like it. And peacocks represent divinity, rank, power, and beauty. The last candidate is from Catherine Sharbaugh. We give credit to her. She found, here it is, a pheasant, a Chinese pheasant, which has the little nub on his head, right there, and also looks very similar to the body shape as well. This theory that it might be a pheasant is a symbol in Chinese art of power, authority, and immortality, nobility, and high rank in office and civil service. So they're all good candidates, but I think I'm leaning toward the phoenix, the pheasant now. In any case, whatever the bird ends up being, you can see that it's more than just a bird. It has meaning. The symbols carry meaning, and it would have been very intentional, both on the part of the emperor who is approving this design. Also, what I found was very interesting during my research is that there's two birds on the bronze flask. And then this is a close-up of it in black and white to kind of show you the incisions. You see the birds there? And that's that's right here. And you can see it close up. So not on the handles, but definitely they are present, so that the idea that he's looking to past examples just strengthens this connection between our vessel and this ancient Han Dynasty vessel. And there's another way that Yongzheng could connect this contemporary work to the past, through its color. Porcelain is naturally white, but the glaze applied to it, or slip applied to it before firing, will give it different colors. In this case, the color that is meant to be suggested is that of jade. To create this color, artisans apply a wash of slip or liquefied clay that contains a high proportion of iron before glazing. The iron interacts with the glaze during the firing and colors it a shade of green, but we don't really know, depending on the levels of iron, what kind of green is going to come out. This glaze was created in China and it was popular because of its beauty and because it resembled jade. And here's two examples of jade cranes from our collection, also from the same dynasty, the Qing Dynasty. And jade appears naturally in 6 colors. One of them is green, so you can have white jade, you can have caramel colored looking jade, you can have different colors of jade. So it's not just green. Jade was a very important precious stone in China that was both auspicious and thought to ward off evil and other negative influences. Superstition suggested that a celadon dish, not unlike our flask, would break or change color if poisoned food or drink was put into it. Another reason why the emperor might want to if you killed somebody to change power, you might worry about somebody killing you also. Celadon, which is what this glaze is called, was actually a term coined by Europeans later on. It wasn't what the Chinese called it. And the term first appeared in France in the 17th century, named after a shepherd named Celadon in a pastoral novel. He wore a pale green costume. And thanks to Ashley, I think it's Ashley who made all the table cloths pale green for our talk today, which kind of makes it interesting. I didn't ask her to do that. It's kind of fun. Also, in the case of another version of this work, now in the V&A in London, now this seal has the Emperor seal, meaning it was after the sample. It was what was approved into production. But this color of this glaze is known as tea dust glaze and was most likely meant to emulate bronze. So harkening back to that bronze example that we saw earlier. And like I said, this is one that's made after. So ours is still very unique in terms of it was made as a sample for his approval. So we're going to go back to the sample because I want to talk a little bit about this, that the year is important in terms of our work. It was made in his 12th year, and that was also the year that he died. So for a long time, we thought this was the only one that existed, because we thought if it was made in his 12th year and then he died, then it never went into production. But as you saw with the tea dust glaze one, it did at least make it one and possibly other. There's an obscure reference online to one in the Imperial collection, which I'll have to go to China to check it out. There's no images available of it online, but I would love to figure out what that one is. But according to, I think it was Sotheby's or Christie's, they mentioned this other one in the Imperial collection. So although official records claim that he died peacefully on October 8, 1735, he made many enemies during his life, as I hope I have established. And according to legend, he was assassinated by a woman, the granddaughter of a man he had executed. Official records say he died peacefully. I'll let you be the judge. All agree the emperor died of an overdose, though, of the medicine he was taking that was ironically supposed to prolong his life. Which leads me to the next figure in connection with our vase, or flask, the emperor's son. Chen Long, seen here in a painting by a Jesuit priest from Italy who came to the court to make this painting. He reigned for 60 years, just shy of his grandfather's long reign, and he abdicated in honor so as not to exceed his grandfather's reign. Under his reign, commerce continued to thrive, painting, printmaking, and porcelain prospered, and even, as I mentioned, Roman Catholic missionaries were allowed to come into the kingdom. They were employed as astronomers and artists. Like his father, he also oversaw the production of many ceramics, only his preference was for much more ornate and decorative works, and the works under the Qin Emperor tend to look more like this than what they do in our collection. They have much more decoration and incised work and lots of ornamentation. But there's at least one exception, and that's this work right here. Look familiar? No, your eyes are not deceiving you. This work looks almost exactly like ours, but with two important differences. The work is blue, of course, I picked up on that right away. But it also has the emperor's seal that's the seal up in the right corner, that's on the bottom of the vase, of Qin Long, not Yongzheng. The other details are that ours are slightly different, is the fact that our birds, the bluebirds, look more slender. Here, can you see that? They've lost that little nub, much more smooth, no bump on the head. And then the shape is slightly different. Ours has a more tapered shape right here, where this just sort of cuts up. So it's not quite as elegant and refined as ours. Interestingly, the work by the emperor's son, so not the very rare piece, the very first piece that his father put the sample, and it's not the one that's approved, but it's the sample. This work sold at auction for over $5 million in 2011. For $5 million, yeah. So, I mean, can you imagine, and I can only ask you to imagine because I can't actually tell you what ours is to insure it at, how much more ours would be worth. So how did such an important and rare piece of porcelain from China wind up in Flint, Michigan? By way of an answer, we have to determine how the work left the country. And while we don't know for sure how that transpired, it is likely that it left China in the hands of the dealer, a Chinese dealer known as C.T. Liu. Here's the photograph of him on the right. He was one of the world's foremost Chinese art dealers in the early 20th century. He originally set up a gallery in Paris in 1908. Here it is right here. It was known as the Pagoda. Eventually, he also expanded to New York City. This is actually a headline from the New York Times, who recently did a profile on him. So sort of a Chinese dealer, trafficker, and mystery. One story about him, this is kind of interesting, because I love these little trivia, is that he had actually planned to board the Titanic with his ceramics, but missed boarding. So we're glad. I mean, I don't know if ours was part of it, but definitely glad that he didn't go down with the Titanic. In New York, he sold to well-known collectors and New York City elite, such as the J.P. Morgan, Henry Clay Frick, Charles Frank Lang Freer, and the Rockefellers. So if you go to museum collections and you see those names as donations and they're Chinese ceramics or works of art, they most likely got them through C.T. Liu, who was the one who was exporting them out of China. And there's controversy about whether or not he was doing that with official approval or not, but he was definitely doing it at a certain time when there was a lot of conflict and transition going on in China, going from the Qing Dynasty to no more dynasty at all. The work in the FIA collection, we know for sure went through his gallery. And that's because there's a sticker that still remains on the bottom of the vase. And can you make it out? It's a C.T. Liu Company, Paris. And it has a number and probably just an inventory number that's all letters. And again, on my whirlwind trip to China to check on the other vase, I could stop in Paris and see if because you can still go to the pagoda and they still have the records for C.T. Liu's wares that he sold. I can find out exactly how much she bought it for, when she bought it, that kind of thing. It's possible that she purchased it in New York. We don't know for sure if she bought it in Paris or New York. It bears the seal of Paris, but that just means that that's where it was cataloged. It could have potentially been in New York as well. So who is this elusive person that we've been hinting at, but haven't gotten around to, who bought the work for us, or bought the work, and eventually gave it to the Flint Institute of Arts? The socialite, Thelma Foy, daughter of Walter Chrysler. So Thelma spent her early life at Flint, living first at the corner of Stevens and First Streets, and then at 514 East Kersley. So this newspaper scan right here is from the home at 514 East Kersley and where she spent some of her time. And then this is the Chrysler family. Here's the family portrait. And there's their children, Walter Jr., Bernice. She's a topic for a different talk another day. And then Thelma, who we're talking about right now, and then Jack. Walter Chrysler, after resigning from his work on the railroad, became a works manager or in charge of production at Buick in Flint. In 1916, Billy Durant, who founded General Motors in 1908, had retaken General Motors from bankers. Chrysler was closely tied to the bankers, and he submitted his resignation. Then Durant made him a counteroffer of a $10,000 salary, which is the equivalent of $250,000 in today's money, and a $500,000 bonus, or $12.5 million, to get him back to Flint. And, well, he took the offer. And he gave him full run of Buick. He said, you could do whatever you want. He stayed and ran the company for 3 more years. In 1919, Chrysler resigned, receiving $10 million for his General Motors stock. He had started at Buick for $6,000 a year and left one of the richest men in America. Chrysler launched his own auto company in 1925, and in addition to his namesake car company, Plymouth and DeSoto were created, and in 1928 he purchased the Dodge Brothers. That same year, he financed the construction of the Chrysler Building in New York City that was completed in 1930. Shortly after her father resigned from Buick, Thelma moved to New York in 1920, but kept ties with people here, including Mary Davison Rice or Mrs. James Rice. And this is a newspaper clipping showing her. And this is Mrs. Byron Foy, Thelma Chrysler of New York, who has recently been the guest of Mr. and Mrs. James A. Rice, Westwood Parkway. And this clipping was given to me by Mrs. Rice's daughter, Rosemary DeCamp. And there Thelma Foy would become one of the most charming women in New York society. And here's another clipping showing, it literally says, one of the most charming women in New York society, Mrs. Byron Foy. So she married Byron Foy. So most of the credit lines that we have here in the museum, it will say Mrs. Foy or Mrs. Byron Foy. Behind her, Mr. Foy, some other people, the Rockefellers, one of the Rockefellers is behind her. But the camera loves her. She's the star, not the other people in the photo. You can really see that she had just a presence about her, and that she really commanded attention wherever she went. And she really did. She was repeatedly voted among the world's 10 best dressed women, and she was featured in the pages of Vogue magazine. So this photo on the right is from Vogue magazine, and here's the official best 10. And there's only 6 on the screen because I couldn't make it fit and make it look right. So but you can see the most important one, Mrs. Byron Foy, one of the first New Yorkers to adopt new look. And keep that in mind right here, what she's got on, because we're gonna come back to it. Her beautiful dresses, most of them Christian Dior, were created especially for her, and now all of them are in the Met's Costume Institute. These are just 2 of them. One is more of a party ball gown dress, and one's more something that I'd love to have to wear to work, if I could get away with the hat anyway. And I actually brought, after the talk was over, I brought down the Christian Dior exhibition catalog that the Met did recently, and it has all of her dresses in there, and it's just amazing to look at because most of them are all from her collection. So she really was a fashionista before there was even that word. She also had an exquisite taste in jewels. Remember that photo we saw, and I apologize that it's blurry, but that's because of the low resolution photograph I found online, but it's the necklace that I want you to pay attention to. On the left, it's a 62 carat diamond. The necklace was later recut by Harry Winston to 58.60 carats, and it sold at auction for $5 million in 2021. We tried to bid on it, but alas, just was not where we were outbid. No, joking. we didn't try to bid on it. But just amazing. Just another example of her taste and amazing wealth at the time. Her photos not only appeared in Vogue in the 1940s and 50s, here's just 2 examples, again, of these amazing dresses that she had created just for her. She was also photographed by Cecil Beaton, who was the photographer to the Queen of England. This work is in our collection, and it was a gift of Thelma's friend, Mary Davison Rice, through her daughter, Rosemary DeCamp. And I want to reiterate, I want to thank Rosemary for all of the clippings, even the catalog I'm going to show you. She saved, her mother saved all of these mementos of Thelma, and we have that now in our curatorial files because of the work that she saved and kept. In addition to being a leader in fashion, her and her husband were also art collectors. They collected French furniture, Chinese porcelain, Impressionist paintings. And I love it when I'm doing research and I find like interesting connections that you wouldn't normally think. Apparently she hired Mr. Samuels of French & Company, and French & Company sounds familiar to any of you who've been around or heard about. They're the same dealers who sold Mrs. Viola Bray the entire Bray Gallery furniture, tapestries, and painting. So and that was in 1956. So at the same time that Thelma is going to French & Company to outfit her beautiful home, Mrs. Bray is also, it's very close in time period, going there to purchase works for the FIA. So it's very interesting, those connections. This is just a picture of her bedroom, but I also brought auction catalogs that include other images of her house from 740 Park Avenue in New York City. Many of the works Thelma collected were sold at auction when she died in 1957 after a battle with leukemia. So it's very sadly she died very early. Some of the paintings were purchased by her brother, Walter Jr., and eventually made their way into his namesake museum in Virginia. I just included one, but there's several other works. This is a Renoir painting, The Daughters of Germain Rouelle, from 1882. 1 year before Thelma died, and now we're finally getting back to Flint, she gave us this rare porcelain flask. And along with 29 other ceramics, and nothing is as rare as this one in terms of the very first sample made, but excellent examples of Chinese porcelain at this time in the Qing Dynasty. And it's really a star in the collection, not only because of its elegance and rarity, but also because of all of the interesting stories that it represents. Thank you. And I'm happy to take questions too, if you have any questions.
Tracee,
Sharon?
are these forms done on wheel or are they hand-built?
Hand-built. Any other questions? No? Well, I'll bring the books out if anybody wants to see them. You can look at them, but just don't do them all. So this is the auction catalog for all of the things that were in her house at the time that she died. So it includes furniture and paintings. And then this is the Dior catalog, and all of the blue tabs are her dresses. So you can sort of see, what amazing taste that she had. And they're just fantastic to look at if you like these kind of things, which I do. Any other questions or? Great, well, thank you for coming. And like I said, we'll be back in the fall. So have a great summer and hope to see you in September. Yeah,
So are you going to plan a fashion show of Thelma's?
Yes, I would love to.
From the net?
I would love to do that, yes.
And sprinkle in the ceramic.
Yeah. And her sister, her niece, which they collected the American naive paintings, she also has some dresses in the Met, but she kind of gets overshadowed by her sister. But she does have some. So we could have both on view. Yeah.
Did she donate other items to our museum?
Yes, 29 ceramics in total. This was just one of them. Yeah. Most of the other ones, there's a few on view that in the gallery, but most of the ones that are in storage right now are either she gave us several bird forms, just like doves, and then she gave us some bowls and some vases. So in the one that I showed earlier, the very simple, elegant vase, that was one of her gifts.
And And is this right now in the decorative arts
Yes,
gallery?
it's not in the Diamond Arts Gallery, it's in the Arts of Asia Gallery, so if you just go through our hallway all the way till you get to the Celadon colored room, you can't miss it, it's right in the middle of the bank of cases there.
Thanks.
Yeah, John.
Did you notice the uncanny resemblance between her profile photographs and Sargent's Madam X?
No, I wanna look at it now, like that one?
Well, that one, go
One more?
one or two back. Right there, look in the mirror.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like Sargent's Madam X.
Yeah. Sure.
Maybe that was a popular pose.
Yeah, right.
Still use that pose.
Yeah, it's very flattering. Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
You mentioned your brother has a museum?
Yes, so the Chrysler Museum in Norfolk, Virginia. And you can go and see some of the works that he bought. He was a collector too, but he didn't have the same kind of ties to Flint the way that his sisters did. So we didn't receive any gifts from him. And he was starting his own museum, so makes sense.
Did her sister give gifts to him?
Yeah, so if you go, after you look at the Chinese flask, take a left down the stairs of the ramp, and then the gallery that's right on the left, when you start to go down the hallway, is our gallery of early 19th century American paintings, and most of them, not all, but most of them in that gallery were given to us by Bernice Chrysler Garbage and her husband. So it was a family affair, and it's funny, when I do this, if I do this talk again about her sister, Dr. Hodge, who's the director at the time, wrote to her and said, do you know that your sister gave us these 29 ceramics? So it's kind of a little bit of a sibling rivalry going around, which we benefited from because we then ended up getting these amazing paintings from their collection. So I don't know if that was really the motivation, but that was in the letter that he was kind of like reminding her, like, don't forget Flint, when you're,
It's beautiful.
yes.
Well,
Where along here was the house located? Like, what's on that site today?
I think that's where 475, someone can correct me if I'm wrong about Flint geography, but it doesn't exist anymore.
No.
514 East Pursley.
The expressway? Yeah.
Is that what it is?
That's what yeah.
so after he left, GM tore his house down and put a highway through it. Bernice gave a large part of her early American naive paintings to the Chrysler Museum. But did Thelma?
No, because they were all sold at auction. So she didn't, the museum didn't exist yet before she died. So she died in 57, and I don't think the museum, I could be wrong about the dates, I'm not sure, but as far as I know, every painting they have was purchased by her brother. And it must have been Mary Rice, because she wrote down the numbers. There's like annotations in here. I think of the prices. What's this one? One of them has prices in here. So either it was the estimates or the actual, I'm not sure. But the Goddess Gallery.
Uh-huh.
It makes me sad to look through this. I'm like, oh.